Township, November 1st,
Yes, sir.
2018. Please rise and join us in the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag
of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Present this evening, we have Mr. Mansour, Ms. Coulter, Mr. Saab, Mr. Brown, Mr. Gelling, Mr. Bandersky, Mr. Harsha, and our planning and building director,
Yes, sir. Guy.
Mr. Mark Lloyd. All right. Next item on our agenda is approval of this evening's agenda. Any changes, anyone? Bandersky, do you have any?
I make a motion that we approve the agenda.
Second.
Motion by Mr. Bandersky to approve the agenda as presented, support by Mr. Saab. All those in favor signal by saying aye.
Aye.
Motion passes 7-0. Next item is approval of minutes. We have two sets of minutes to approve. I think first we'll go through the minutes from September 6, 2018. Mr. Bandersky, any changes?
Mr. Chairman, I reviewed the final draft of the September 6th meeting minutes and found everything to be in order, so I make a motion that the minutes be approved.
Motion by Mr. Bandersky to approve the minutes as presented for September 6, 2018. There's support for that?
Support.
Support by Mr. Mansour. All those in favor signal by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, motion passes 7-0.
Mr. Chairman, I have reviewed the final draft of the meeting minutes for October 4th, 2018, and found everything to be in order, so I make a motion that the minutes be approved.
Mr. Bandersky, support by Mr. Harsha. To approve the meeting minutes Thursday, October 4th, 2018 as presented. All those in favor signal by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, motion passes 7-0. Next item on our agenda is an opportunity for public comment. This is an opportunity for anyone in the audience to address the Planning Commission if they would like, for anything that we don't have a public hearing scheduled for, and we have no public hearings this evening. So if there's anyone in the audience that would like to address the Planning Commission, now would be the time. All right. Doesn't look like anyone plans to address the Planning Commission. We'll close the public comment, bring it back up to the Planning Commission. And we will correspondence. The agenda says that we're planning zoning.
No, it's just a typo. Sorry.
Okay, I guess I didn't see any on that. Also, I guess I should mention that Mr. Yancho just joined us.
I've made a note, put it in the minutes.
We move on to old business. Master plan discussion, RFP.
Yes, sir. Well, we've done it. We put our RFP out, and I'd like to walk through a little bit of where we're at and what we should be expecting. And we'll talk a little bit more after that. Any questions you might have, we can entertain those. So just bear with me for a second. This really won't take long. I just want to bring everybody up to date and kind of let you know what we've got going on. We currently have two master plans essentially in place. The amendment, which was done in August of 2013, effectively incorporated the Tech Village components into it. So essentially the 2010 plan and an awful lot of the implementation provisions are still applicable today, and they're represented in the amendment as well. But the amendment was a simple amendment as far as it goes to address and bring in Tech Village. There wasn't a real comprehensive effort. This next effort will be very comprehensive in nature, from soup to nuts. So that'll make a little bit of a difference from what you did before. And why now? Well, we have to. The commission's been doing your reviews and reporting out your activities for a good while, and you recently completed your 5-year review, and as a result of that, you determined that it was time to rewrite this master plan. So you have an obligation to do it in accordance with the Planning Act, the Michigan Planning Act, and so that's where we're at. We're meeting our obligations and beginning the process of putting together our master plan. We did, in fact, issue an RFP, a request for proposals. When that went out on October 11th, we sent it out to BidNet, which includes Mitten now, if anyone's familiar with the bidding process. Mitten was a separate agency, but BidNet covers that. It's it's actually a bit more expansive BidNet than the Mitten program, but we also have it on the Township's webpage, the Michigan Association of Planners, the magazine, it's in that, and it's in the newspaper. I think we've had over 350 views of that happened in 3 days. When it happens, that's kind of the big push, and you get a few stragglers. But we've had over 100 downloads, which means folks have taken it serious enough to download the document and begin the process. We have a list, a lot of the consultants that you may have heard of around Michigan and other places have at least downloaded the document. So it looks like there's a lot of interest out there, folks helping us get this completed. So that should be successful. So I'll change gears a little and just walk through the process just to give folks a sense, not getting into detail, just kind of an overview of what goes on here. So we've got the RFP out. We're in the process of soliciting proposals. Once we receive them, they'll go to the clerk's office. She'll open them, record them, and then she'll distribute them accordingly. And what we'll do is we'll review those proposals, make decisions on who we would choose to interview. There may be some through just the review of the physical documents themselves that we'll start to pare them down a bit, select 3 or so consultant firms to interview. And then once the interviewing team is completed with that, we'll bring those recommendations to the Planning Commission for the Planning Commission to take a look at and review and hopefully agree with the proposed consultant. And then once that happens, we make a recommendation to the board from the commission because the board has to approve the contract and the execution of that contract. And once that's done, the project will be turned back over to the Planning Commission for completion, and we'll commence the project. So, there are some procedures there. That there will probably take, maybe in the neighborhood of 30 days to get through something like that, just so you have a sense of timing. And then, the project itself, once we get going with that, the Planning Commission is going to get immersed with staff, of course, but also with the consultants over the first couple of months to do the visioning, so that the consultants will be doing a lot of interviewing, working with the commission, walking through processes and issues. Those that have been identified by the previous efforts, and those that have been identified by the consultant, as well as new and different ideas and concepts that the commission might have. So that'll be a chance to kind of get the vision issues up to date and identify how and what we're intending to do. And then public engagement process will essentially start, at the kickoff, but I put it up there in the second place simply because it's going to be an ongoing process. We will be engaging the public. We're kind of already are. We've already let folks know that we're doing our master plan. There's no formal receipt of any information yet, but folks do know that we're looking for consultants and beginning that. So once we get going with that, that public engagement will last from the beginning to the end of the project, full 12 to 13 months. The kickoff, that would be a meeting that we would end up having with the commission and board, probably. It's not for sure, but it's likely that'll be the case. It'll be up to the commission to help determine how you want to move some of that forward. It'll be good ideas presented. And of course, finding out, where the board is in their interest in being involved at that level of the Planning Commission master plan. We don't know yet. And then we begin the process of data collection, and that takes a while, and that's part of the work that we're talking about being able to do potentially, not sure about all of it or not, but doing some of that work administratively here. with the staff that we have. And then the documentation preparation, that'll be ongoing. They'll put their draft document together in a format probably right from the beginning, and they'll just start pouring information. And as time goes on, they'll manipulate the document and begin to put the document into the format that they really want to have it in, and they'll build from there. But they'll start loading documentation and information in pretty much right away. And that'll take a few months for that to happen as well. And then once we get near the end of this and we've essentially agreed upon the plan, then we'll begin the process of conducting the public hearing. Now keep in mind, during this whole 8 months or so up until that time, 8-10 months, you know, there will have been plenty of opportunity for input from the public, from the commission, from staff, and if you don't mind, I'll back up a little bit and let you know that we are anticipating that there'll be a heavy review from the consultants at the staff level. We've got a lot of folks here who have a lot of great historic information, and we want to make sure that we push that information out. And frankly, I think, you know, having, you know, somebody managing this project in-house as opposed to simply by the consultants will help us to get some of that local information a little bit better, I think, than we might have had otherwise. And key to that is going to be the utility and infrastructure data that we're going to need to justify our development plans. So those are all going to be important pieces of the effort that we're about to engage in, and the staff is all aware of this, and you know, there's a lot of interest and not necessarily excitement, but interest on getting this done at the staff level. So, and then when we're done with that, we get to start it all over again and begin another 5-year cycle.
Just a comment if I can.
Sure, of course.
To add what you just said, by doing it in-house rather than consultant, there's a better buy-in to the whole process.
For managing it? Thanks, I think you're right. Yeah. You mean out in the community? Is that how you're thinking
Well,
buy-in? Okay.
The staff here,
Yeah.
I mean, rather than somebody hand it to you and it isn't ours, you know.
Right,
I didn't
okay.
have a lot to say in it versus, I
Yeah.
worked on
This is ours, yeah. We will own this. This will be reflective of the work that this group does, and we'll manage that pretty well. So that's kind of how this process and things are going to go. I realize it's not taking up a lot of our time, but my goal here was just to let you know what you should expect time-wise, and then any questions you might have or comments. I know there was a discussion about making sure that the master plan was an item on our agenda. It's on this one. It'll be on the next one. What would be helpful is if the commission has some things that you specifically that you'd like to see or have, if there's anything in particular. I know that as time goes on, issues will come up and we'll identify them and say, hey, I'd like to talk about that at the next meeting or whatever. But right now, there's some general information, some basic stuff. Let me know. Happy to try to build that, you know, that knowledge base before we get going. And also, I want to remind everybody that all the master plan stuff is available on our webpage in one particular spot so that the consultants and everybody else can go to it and use it and access it. And it's a great resource for all of us too, because it's all right there. Otherwise, you're either thumbing through these big books or you're trying to find it yourself online. So we have a number of things happening right now that, you know, I realize they're going to be, you know, educational for all of us, of course, but for the community. And I think that we ought to, educational, as I said, and I think that we need to push these issues out to, you know, some of these young folks and work hard to try to get folks involved. I'm going to be going to the schools and asking if they've got folks who they think might want to be interested, a student or a group or anything, because we do need to and we ought to try to find ways of engaging and keeping folks engaged, not just, hi, come on in for an hour and a half, have some water and some chips, and we'll see you in 5 years. You know, we want to try to keep people involved and interested, and that's quite an undertaking. It's not an easy effort.
Do you have a deadline or due date for the RFP submissions?
I do, and I'm sorry if I didn't say it. It was on here. It's November 14th. Yeah. Sorry about that.
So I have a couple of questions. Regarding the, after the November 14th timeframe, I think that maybe a couple of us were going to kind of do some more in-depth evaluation of the RFPs when they come in. Do we have some kind of a matrix or some kind of evaluation criteria that we'll have prepared?
Yes, you will. I'll have exact information. I'll send it out to folks in advance, so you'll have a chance to look at it in case there's any questions, of course. And I think it'd be a good idea for us to try to maybe sit down for an hour, half an hour someday to just get together, or at least in advance. Yeah.
And then the other question is kind of a follow-on from this one. Do we have any ideas on how to really get meaningful engagement from the public? Any techniques or any thoughts about, how we can, get some real energy behind that?
I think the biggest part of that is going to be what we come up with during our visioning sessions, because the key there is going to be, you need to make sure you find things that folks are interested in, and then you need to get it out in front of them. It's one thing to say we're doing our master plan, but then you got to dig a little deeper, I think, when you put the information out. Maybe please don't hold this term against me, but maybe I'm going to say scare them a little bit, simply by the terminology and the things that you might be putting out there. I don't mean that, I mean intrigue them. Let me go with intrigue. So you intrigue them by putting language in there about the fact that we're going to be looking at, housing options and density issues and commercial locations and things like that, and try to make sure that we're putting that out there instead of, as I said, simply letting folks know we're in the process of doing a master plan. So that undertaking is always, it's challenging, no doubt, but it also has the potential to be very, very successful. The other thing that, as I think we talked about a little bit at the last meeting, was the idea of doing, some comprehensive survey work through the possibility of either adding some work onto this project or through another consulting firm or something to support this effort. So those would be a couple of ideas that I've thought of and have up my sleeve, if you will.
We could lower their taxes.
Pardon me?
We could lower the participants' taxes.
Yeah, you could put that. I appreciate that. That's probably the best one right there.
Raise the non-participants' taxes.
Yeah.
I guess as Mr. Mansour said, I'm glad to see you've got something that you're gonna have ready. If we had 100 downloads, we could get quite a few proposals.
Oh, sure.
We need a way to, at least initially,
Yep.
kind of narrow it down.
Right.
So.
Yeah, we'll have that to go through. We'll have several phases of that you'll see. There'll be that initial go through, checking, fundamental pieces of is everything here and that, and then moving into the quality of the proposer and stuff. Yep. So I appreciate those questions. And that information, I'll start pushing some of that out next week, and we'll start to share that.
Any other questions on the master plan process?
If you would, I did ask Mr. Mansour if he had anything he wanted to add about some of the thoughts that he had on his budget ideas, and whether or not there were some relationships that he might want to discuss with the commission. I know we talked a little bit about it last time, but if there was anything else, I thought it'd be a good idea, just so we know everything.
So sure, as part of the strategic initiatives at the Township Board, we're tracking a number of them. The two that are intersecting here, at least immediately, have to do with retail and business, retail and restaurant attractiveness, and then planning and zoning. So we've built a little bit of money, I don't know how much, maybe $10,000 or so for each one of those, with the idea, for instance, in using the business attractiveness, that we want to conduct, and maybe we can do it in conjunction with some of the public touch points here, or maybe separately, but to get a group of area businesses, ones that have existing retail or existing restaurants, kind of bring them in, ask if they would be willing to spend an hour or two with us and kind of go through what they think in terms of the township, what kind of support, help, amenities, what they would need in order to expand their businesses. And by doing that, we would hope to serve them as well as build some attractiveness for people that aren't in our township now, and bring new people in. What we want to do ahead of that, though, is to provide some renderings of what a retail restaurant kind of area might look like in this township. So maybe we have some outdoor, some what's the term, elevations that we would have, the kind of a more elaborate, I wouldn't call them strip malls, but kind of a combined retail, restaurant, kind of walking areas. So just to give some folks a thought starter of what might be possible around here. So that's one area. And then the second one has to do with our planning and zoning activities. And the idea there is that we want to spend a little time and money benchmarking what we do, our ordinances, the processes that we use to go through to establish our zoning with some of the best communities in the area, to just see where we're doing and if there's areas where we can improve, as another way to help encourage people to invest and come to the township.
Yeah, if I might expand on that, after hearing that again, I do realize that there are a number of things that are being talked about here that overlap, and they haven't been figured out how we'll put them together, but I think the opportunity's there, and I think it behooves us to see if there is some way of benefiting from these working collectively. If there is, great. But this benchmarking concept is a good one in a number of ways, none the least of which is that, we're working hard at trying to streamline our processes around here, and the benchmarking will give everybody an idea of how well we do. But also, it helps us in regards to some of the other bigger concepts that we have in mind, such as redevelopment ready, and one-stop shopping, if you will, so that when folks come in, we'll know, are we way down the list, or are we doing okay and we simply need to, improve upon what we do, or do we need to overhaul? So those are good. I mean, I kind of have a sense of where we'll end up, but I think those are all good things, and there are relationships, and that's why I thought it would be helpful to have that pointed out again.
Mr. Chairman, if I may.
Mr. Brown.
I'm trying to remember how, or if it at all, we talked about the Dort Highway development as well as extension. And forgive me if I'm forgetting that, but I think it's really important if we look at an area that we might want to really seriously give a lot of attention to. I see that in the township as just an excellent place to start. And what can we do there in our visioning for the next 5 years?
Sure. It's a great point, and if I might, the DDA is sort of the same. We have a new DDA that's coming into play, and the Planning Commission is going to have some responsibilities there. I know it hasn't quite bubbled up to this point yet, but it's out there, and you will have some responsibilities, but the plan will need to and ought to reflect that, identify that, and suggesting how and in the manner in which we pursue that. The same as Dort Highway and the redevelopment ready, the Tech Village, all those things that we've had, and we've got the north end of town. We've got plenty of issues to get a hold of and analyze. So, some of these things will really line up good. A lot of this work's been done, corridor studies, and I think you talked about that in the past, about how a lot of that's already been incorporated into your zoning guidelines and requirements. So we may want to really look at that and determine whether or not we're going to need to keep referencing it, because they're pretty old, and we'll just need to take a look at that. So those are the kinds of things that we'll do, and we'll get ourselves right up to date.
Mr. Bandersky.
I looked at Al, and you talk about restaurants and getting data. One of my neighbors, the Christakises, owned, until recently, the Palace down here, and prior to that, they had a restaurant on Saginaw Street there across from, the other side of Dort Highway. So they've been in the restaurant business in the township for, I'm going to say 30 years, maybe more. They might be a good source for somebody to talk with, just to, get what their thoughts are and their experiences. I know they sold the Palace 3 times, because they got it back a few times, but they'll be moving here in the spring, going out of the state. So
I think that's exactly right. People that have already demonstrated an investment in the community, we certainly want to nurture those and find ways that to make them more successful, and really start to provide some better variety in the township than we have now. So we have some favorites, no question about that, but we certainly can use some more variety, more diversity in that. And so if any of you know of people that, owners, I mean, we'll go to the usual suspects, but if you know any that you think might be really good participants and give some good ideas on these, it would be very helpful if they're here or if they're interested in maybe taking a look at Grand Blanc. So that's a good. There was an opportunity, I think, and I think you were touching on that, Mr. Brown, is when we take a look at the master plan and we go into our visioning section, maybe it's appropriate to identify 4 or 5 areas in the county that we want to prioritize. Maybe the DDA is kind of one of them, the Dort Highway extension, the corridor. Maybe there's 2 or 3 others. Not so much concerned with what was done in the past because we have a whole new demographic going on now.
Right, right. But typically, and I don't disagree with not being too concerned about that, it's just that there is, and I think everybody understands the importance of history and the background that leads us to where we're at and helps to make decisions on maybe doing things differently. The other thing that I wanted to point out, if I don't lose my train of thought, and I have, so I'm just going to let that go. Sorry.
Mr. Chairman, I have a question, Mr. Harshaw. We're agreeing at this, but it seems to me that, or maybe a question is that, is the city brought into this thought process at all? Because, I mean, it's set in the middle of the township. Got an impact on everything, around us. They have as much as we have on them, probably maybe even more so.
We will at least let them know what we're doing, and I'm sure that we will invite them to let them know what's going on. Got a certain balance, I guess, that it's township plan,
Yeah.
but they'll definitely be kept.
In fact,
Rise
Chairman Gellings, it's a requirement for us as we do the master plan to circulate it to the surrounding communities for those interactions. But maybe we should do something ahead of that, because that's typically when it's mostly baked. Yeah, so I think your point is maybe we should engage them earlier in the process.
We have had in the past, it's been years ago, we have had representative from the city that would come to our meetings.
I mean, I think that's a great idea, and you're exactly right. We have an obligation to communicate with them through at least advising them, but I think these extra steps that we're talking about are good. I'm going to do an analysis of all the bordering communities and the township versus the edge of our master planning designations, just to see where we may have any significant conflict that could be problematic or needs to be looked at. It's not a major issue, but it's something to concern yourself with in the event Michigan ever gets to that point where lawsuits start happening between communities. You gotta look at those things.
I thought last time we did the master plan, we shared a copy of that with, I think, Burton, Holly.
all,
did.
Yes.
absolutely.
The way that happens is, just so everybody knows, we do send copies of that out to there's a number of jurisdictions around us, plus there's other agencies, utility agencies, railroads, and others that we would also send to the school districts and things. So they'll all get that, or what they'll get is an electronic notice that'll advise them that it's available like everybody else will these days. It'll be available to them electronically, or there'll be hard copies in the library and other places for folks to come and look at. But what they do now is typically we send a notice out and advise people of how to look at it, not always where to come. Usually people just want to look at it online now.
Rare to get much
Right. From the communities, you mean?
feedback.
Yeah, it's rare. Unless there's just something, and who knows? It's worth taking a good look at.
Will there be an executive summary to the plan?
No, there's not typically one. There's an introduction, but not typically.
Would there be?
There could be. We can talk about that. There's maybe a summary of the document. Maybe there's something, we need to look at why Well, what do we want that for? What good is it gonna do us? What are we gonna use it for?
Well, it might be the appetite to do a deeper dive.
Oh, yeah, great. I'm just saying, you'd want it to serve a purpose.
Anything else regarding the master plan?
Well, Mr. Chairman, if I may, I know when, the last go around when we did it, Trillium was certainly a big focal point of development there, and it's kind of disappointing and sad that it's never really come to fruition like we envisioned 5 years ago or more. And it's just, that to me also looks like an opportunity, Mr. Mansour. Have we even talked with the owner of the property in any recent times at all about additional development of the parcel?
That'd be a good one to invite in.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
I mean, maybe we're not getting any, conversation going back and forth. And it just seems like if we're looking for a spot that's in the township, I mean, that's almost the epicenter of what's going on. I mean, Holly Road has been developing like crazy, but there's property there that has not been developed that could really add a great deal to the aura of what Grand Blanc Township is about.
Well, that's right in the heart of the DDA too.
Yes.
Newly formed DDA.
Mr. Yancho?
I think maybe it might be advisable to bring in some other restaurants, especially those that are in the city. And what comes to mind is Italia Gardens, because they could have located anywhere in the township or city, but they picked a very small, problematic location in the city. And I'm wondering why they did that and not come to the township. The other thing is, this is a good opportunity, I think, for drawing people in, but also to explain to them how businesses work. We see it often on social media where the public says, why don't you guys in the township bring in Whole Foods or bring in this or that? And so all those people that are commenting might be interested, but we might be able to use it as an educational tool as well, so that they understand the process.
And it might be helpful in some circumstances, with technology being the way it is, that we take advantage of maybe videotaping some of these sessions and have some of those available for folks to replay or whatever too.
Move on to program discussion.
Sure. First of all, I have to thank Commissioner Coulter for her help so far on the solar, and we'll get into that in a second. But what I've done is put together, just continuing with this effort of putting together this work program. It's not been adopted yet, but I'm working off it, trying to kind of get it started, if you will. We got plenty going on out there. This is just an updated version to kind of keep it alive, if you will. But I did want to take a minute and just give you some ideas of some of what we started to do. And when I say we, I mean Commissioner Coulter and myself. We did get together after the last meeting, started some communication about, the projects that we had out there, what we had done in the past, what maybe had been worked on but didn't quite get pushed over the goal line. You had a couple of things that you guys have been working on, important issues, the solar, wind, a couple of different things that were out there, and they never quite, got legs. But and with solar, which is one I'm concentrating on, we have provisions in the ordinance whereby we allow it, but we don't have any provisions in the ordinance whereby we regulate it. And so that creates a little bit of a problem, potentially. The good thing is it's in Tech Village, and there's not a lot going on over there, and we have control over the timing. But point is, you need to be careful that you don't allow something that you don't have provisions for. So we spent some time taking a look at this and begun to kind of break it down a little bit, look at some other ordinances out there. And I think we've kind of found we're still kind of finding ourselves and how we're gonna work together and how maybe we work some of this out, but it seems to be evolving pretty well, and I think we'll gain some ground, and we'll probably have something that we can bring back to the commission in a couple of months, maybe, I would think, or a month or so. Anything else you might want to add, Dolores?
Yeah, a couple things. One of the,
Please.
as you said, we're kind of, in the early stages
Yeah.
of looking at some other ordinances that have, regulated solar energy systems, whether it's the roof-mounted or the solar panels, and then also, what they call solar farms, which, the major type developments as opposed to ones that are basically for personal use or, for the use of whatever building is on that premises. One of the things that I mentioned is I think before we bring it to the commission, it would be, and once you and I have kind of worked out a draft, would be like to have another commissioner or two even, kind of take a look at it too and get some additional input, because, it's not my area of expertise in terms of solar energy systems. I mean, I know a little bit about, trying to write ordinances that are clear and well organized, but anyway, I wanted to mention that.
Mr. Chairman, refresh my memory, didn't we, regarding solar, didn't we have the folks in from MTA within the last couple of years regarding solar over at their facility there at the corner of Maple and Dort? And I think that we had approved some installation of solar systems over there. Do you recall that or not?
At the MTA on Maple and Dort?
Yeah.
I remember the discussion, I don't know
I was
that we got to
thinking that,
that level of detail.
I was thinking that we might have, but it never came to fruition.
I wouldn't be surprised if they were thinking about it, because they were looking at trying to kind of cover all the bases
Oh,
there
yeah,
for a while. So
absolutely.
that makes sense, but I don't, there's nothing over there that I know of, unless it's roof mounted and out of the way. I mean, I don't remember seeing anything, and we went through that recent plan for
Yeah.
MTA, and it didn't show up on there either.
It probably just
There's
came.
been some,
So-
there was some discussion, but I
Yeah.
don't think there's.
Okay.
Things
Trying to
gone
remember what
beyond
that was.
But if I might, it's interesting, because I think our master plan, I'd have to find it, but there are some components in it that discuss sustainability. It's important. It's going to be in our next master plan as well, but maybe we can get, and I know we don't want to get too specific in a master plan. Everybody understands that, but, maybe we reference solar, and, we actually use the word as an example, at least, of our efforts towards sustainability. And what we would probably do would be, we would make a comment about solar and the need to be sustainable. But then what you'd find is in the implementation section of our plan, you would see something, if we hadn't done it, adopt a solar ordinance, or whatever the case might be. So those are the kinds of things that would be in there. You want support in your master plan for what you're doing in your zoning ordinance, and that's what we'll be working on.
Good point.
Chairman Gillings? So, Director Lloyd, under the project called administrative approvals, what was that referring to?
That's referring to those things that the staff has authority to approve, like a building permit over the counter, right? A site permit for someone to locate a shed, certain expansions of businesses up to a certain amount, or a site plan, if you will, an amendment to 5%. And so those would be the administrative amendment things that I'm talking about. And what we're going to be looking at with regards to administrative approvals or whatever would be, how can we streamline the process by allowing some of these things to be done administratively, and what are the things that we might look at that we could do administratively that are coming, maybe they're coming before the Planning Commission or the ZBA for that matter, and maybe they're not necessarily needing to come to that level. If we establish some criteria, it can help speed things up for folks, and not that your dockets are huge and you need to limit it, but those are the kinds of things that help provide better, higher levels of customer service if they're trying to move through a process. And to make them go through the larger plans, the specifics of a meeting, pay for the meeting and do all that in a month and a half, 2 months. we think that there may be some things that we could be looking at that would maybe be able to be done administratively.
Add, a kind of an example of that is when we were talking about solar ordinance issues, the question is, in what circumstances might you want to make, or require them to get a special land use, maybe solar systems over a certain size, as opposed to just allowing them, if it complies with the other requirements of the ordinance, to allow them to come with a sketch plan and have, it approved administratively, like if someone, say, just has a, residential lot and they want to put some solar panels in their backyard or something on the roof, they shouldn't have to necessarily come to the planning commission for that. But I think that's one of the issues we were looking at, how much do you want to be done administratively as opposed to, a formal site plan or a special land use that would have to come to the planning commission.
Exactly. Thanks for that clarification. The point there being, what happens is if we establish and create adequate and appropriate language that's very definitive, then you can deal with things administratively. And if it's non-discretionary, in other words, it has to be, absolute. But if things are potentially a problem, like let's say we decide we're going to let somebody have a 100-square-foot solar system, if you will, a solar energy system on their property, and it has to be 10 feet away from the property line and 10 feet away from the other property line. So we've got some standards, and we look at that, we go, if somebody builds one of those, it won't impact anybody, won't have an impact on any neighbor, so we're going to allow it, just like a shed, say. But then moving on to the larger version that Dolores was referring to, that is a great point, because if we're going to allow them to be bigger, we have them go through a special land use, because if it's bigger, it may reflect more light, it may create shadowing or shading, or who knows what the issue might be. And so those would be the kinds of things that would be more subjective and would need a discretionary approval by a commission as opposed to one that's administrative in nature. That's the kind of the difference there.
Part of it, I'm guessing, too, that we would have, for some things, there may be a threshold as to what even requires a permit.
Oh, exactly, yep.
I think that's something that needs to be clear, because a lot of people don't understand what they need a permit.
Yeah, Mr. Lloyd, I'd be happy to work on tree ordinance
Okay.
in the plan.
All right. I think I have some names from some other stuff in the past. I haven't filled all this out. I'll fill it out, and then I'll probably bring this to the next meeting and ask for it to be officially adopted. And then we'll move into our next year.
If you would, I'd suggest you send it out with the agenda next meeting.
Okay. I'll follow
So
up.
there's a chance to kind of review and think
Sure.
about it.
Yep, thanks. Good idea.
Anything else on this?
No, sir. Thank you.
You've got a few things populated with the future projects list as well?
Pardon me? I'm sorry.
I said, I see you've also got some things populated with the future projects list.
Yeah, these are just things that are sort of hanging around. Some of them come off your, previous work that this commission has done. I think that, we'd want to go through those. I'm personally struggling a little bit with the PUD ordinance in regards to the number of steps associated with it. It's just overkill. I don't know that we need to have so many steps in that process. And there's some other things that we'll look at too. And I'm not talking about streamlining for the sake of less quality of a review. That has nothing to do with it. It's just very cumbersome. Some communities approve PUDs by a special land use. It's done, boom. But we go through a 3-4 step process, if you think about it. It goes into you got a preliminary, then you got a conceptual, and you go to the board, and the board comes back and says, go ahead, and then you have to have a final come back and forth. It's a little challenge.
I think that this is from a historical standpoint. This was written when we had a large piece of property here at Deer Park that it was new to us, I think. And that's
Okay.
probably why that ordinance was
A
written.
couple extra steps just to make sure. Yeah, yeah, they're good for that, from that standpoint,
Yeah,
but
from
they
the size,
slow
but
things down.
You're right, I think we did in the last, I don't know if it was in the last 2010,
we reduced the size that was required
Yes.
for PUD. So you're right, maybe we need to look at, is that process too cumbersome for us?
Yeah. Yeah, we can get into that. We'll work together on that, and we'll see the challenges within that language. It just gets difficult and expensive.
Anything else regarding work program? If not, we would normally go into new business. I don't believe we have any new business this evening. Takes us to committee reports. Mr. Mansur, you have anything else you want to?
So just a couple of quick things to update the planning commission. So the township board right now is heavily involved in budget reviews. We've been doing that for the last couple of months. Need to wrap that up by December, but we're going through each of the different areas line by line. So that's what we're engaged in. The question that I did have though is the Metro Alliance and the County Road Commission had a request for projects, a request for out to the various communities if they want to put any projects in the queue. Do you know, did we propose anything?
Gosh, I don't know.
Don't know?
I frankly, I hadn't heard of it.
Haven't
It
heard
would
of
have
it.
probably gone to our DPW folks,
Okay.
so. But that's a good question.
Yeah, they're due on the 6th, so I'll ask. I know the word went out through the clerks and to the DPWs. So, all right. No, but other than that, nothing from the board.
Questions for Mr. Mansur?
No, I would just comment, I'm glad to read about the added money for roads
Mm-hmm.
in the township. That's gonna help.
Yeah, I mean, it's always a tricky situation because, really the county is responsible for the roads, and we can't kind of pretend that we can afford to do things with the roads, but where we can match the funds that are available, it really helps our residents in a lot of ways. So that's what we try to make a room to do that.
Along those lines, I was absolutely stunned and pleasantly surprised on the repair of the Holly Road mess.
Mm-hmm.
I went, I can't believe they're doing that. So it was great.
Good. Small progress.
All that worked.
Lloyd, do you have anything else for planning and zoning?
I do. I just want to ask everybody to please let us know, me in particular, if you have any issues with your computer or receiving our information electronically. And I say that because this master planning effort is we're going to work hard at trying to get things to folks electronically. That's the goal. Now, we'll have hard copies of everything here for folks, but the idea of being able to get out and deliver all these things to folks is probably not going to happen. So I guess, first of all, I want to make sure that if those who are getting things electronically, that it's okay, you're comfortable with it, it's coming in okay, or you're having problems.
No, lately, I mean, for me, lately, it's been
Okay? Now, I know there's some spam and some other things going on with some folks, and I'll get with Robbie. But what I think I may do, but I don't want to, interfere in your lives, but I'm thinking I'd like to maybe have Robbie give you guys a call or do something. Or maybe you can just call him. Does everybody know who I'm talking about when I say Robbie Beller? He's our IT guy. Is everybody familiar with him? Yeah. Okay. Is everybody comfortable just giving him a call if you need anything? And I'm asking you to do that if you have any problems right now. Anything. Because I just don't want to start this process and then run into an issue with technology. So please help us to help you, I guess, is what I'm getting at. We'll do a little bit of research. I know, Vince, you had some issues there, and we'll get Robbie to give you a call. He's been he hasn't been in all week, so we'll get back with folks. So I just want to make sure that part's working well for everybody, and then I also want to let you know.
Director Lloyd, 1 second.
Yeah.
So, I haven't had a problem getting the emails with the attachments and things, but I'm pretty sure that as we start to go through the master plan, that it's going to start to become the files are going to start to become quite large, and that usually starts to bog down memory and in people's emails, etc. So I don't know if we've thought about kind of establishing a website and then distributing links to it to let people know there's an update, and you can just click on it and go there.
Yeah, we can do that, but really, just for everyone's information, when we're doing this master plan, it's likely that not until the end would we be giving you a bundled document. Everything would be sections probably, so it's likely that we're not gonna build a big document over time between us. That'll be being done by the consultant, but the documents that you would be getting would be much smaller versions of specific topics and issues that we'd be looking at. But just so you know, I mean, I understand what you're saying, and we'll take advantage of those links for sure. And then the other thing I wanted to mention was that talked to Mr. Laddie, David Laddie, the township's attorney, and he's quite excited about what we're doing with the master plan and would like to be involved, and I'd like to have him come in and provide some information to the commission, anything that you think you'd like to know about, but I know Dave would have his own, but I did ask him. I think it's important that you have an understanding and know that the township's legal, the township's attorney is helping in part of this review and ensuring that we have a good document.
Along that line, I think Mr. Laddie attended a lot of our meetings. If I recall, the last time we went through
Most of them, yes.
the master plan, and he was right here with us and helping us through
He would give some
lots
good
of those
guidance.
kinds of
Oh,
things.
yeah.
So he was
Yeah,
very,
you might wanna word that a little differently.
Yes,
because
very helpful.
That could get us in trouble, you know, so.
Okay.
very helpful.
Yeah, he's a wonderful guy and he's very knowledgeable. I just think that adds another level of help and insight.
Else?
Nothing from me, thank you.
Brown, anything from zoning board of appeals?
Well, I'm gonna have to ask Mr. Mansour if he could bail me out, because at the last zoning board of appeals meeting, I was unable to attend, and I'm hoping that maybe you could
I'm not on
review,
the-
if anything.
I'm not on the zoning board of appeals,
It's Lonnie.
but I would love to be, I would have loved to say I could bail you out. I think trustee Atkins may be
Yes,
on there.
yes, yes,
right?
you're right.
It's the other good-looking trustee.
Yeah, you're right. My error.
No update this month.
I have none.
Same for site plan review, we haven't had any site plans in the last month, so.
I'm doing them all administratively, I'm sorry, I've taken it all. You know. It's teasing.
Yeah, nothing. Mr. Brown, do you have a motion?
To adjourn? Certainly I do.
Support?
Motion by Mr. Brown to adjourn, supported by Mr. Mansour. All those in favor, signal by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, motion passes 8-0. We are adjourned at 7:31.
7:51.
7:50.
No, 72.
Oh my gosh, I'm looking at the wrong.
Thank you.